And hello and welcome to 2026. Okay, I can stop now. Andrew Peterson is my name, and I am the CEO of the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia. Welcome to BCSD Australia Exchange, the first for 2026 in Zoom meeting format, encouraging a conversational approach, which is why we do it as a meeting rather than as a webinar. As you've just heard, it is being recorded and it will then be available for re-listening and re-watching via Insider for those members who receive Insider on Monday mornings. And for everyone else, including non-members, it will be available on our YouTube channel barely half an hour after that time. All right, in opening, as always, let me acknowledge the country that I am coming to you from, and we are broadcasting to you today from the land of the Camaragal people. And we acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging, and particularly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders to our first exchange for 2026. So the scene has been set. As I announced in the promo for this year's first exchange, that we're still looking back, but we're also looking forward in a 2025-2026 frame to remind members what BCSD will help them navigate into this year and what we all had to overcome as a result of last year. As you all appreciate, we're only a few weeks into 2026, but it feels like we're already in the middle of the calendar year. And I don't know about you, but it already feels like the pace has already lifted. I can't believe how frenetic it has become already. More signal, more noise, certainly from certain parts of the geopolitical world, and more pressure on leaders to make decisions with imperfect information. And I think that will be kind of a thematic that we will be talking about this year. From our own part, I think BCSD Australia saw that 2025 was a year where a lot of organisations were moving from announcing to operationalising, and in many cases doing so quite quietly. They weren't necessarily wanting to make too much noise about what they were doing and how they were doing it. In 2026, I think that gap between credible capacity and credible narrative is only going to widen, and there are some key points that no doubt our illustrious speakers will now point to in just a few moments. For those of you who haven't caught up with the news, this year is also BCSD Australia's 35th year as an organisation. That's right, and don't we look so young for it too? And what that means for members is practical. We exist to help you. Oh, thank you, Barbara. We exist to help you stay in front of what's coming, not just through events like this and engagement, but also through the tools and the intelligence that we share with you, that we develop with you, and that we hope helps make decisions easier, because that is our purpose. A quick reminder, Insider, for those of you who are at the member category that receive that, is the member hub for what matters week to week. You should get it every 9 o'clock every Monday morning. If you don't, please tell me in the chat. Consult Watch is now a really, really important component of that, and Insider is a link to Consult Watch, which is our AI chatbot on what's going on in the consultation world, both in Australia but also through the OECD and through the UNFCCC, the UNCBD, and I think we're about to add the UNCCD, the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. Why? Because this year is the triple convention threat of all three conventions being held this year. So it's timely to get up to date with what's going on from a policy perspective and what those particular agencies are asking for feedback, which a number of them are. TLDR, for those of you who do receive, thank you so much for the support. I know that for some of you it is quite a flow of data on occasions. We are trying to moderate it in such a way that you don't receive too much too often. But as you would appreciate, as do we, so much is happening at the moment, it's hard to know what's not important to not share. But we're trying to develop a protocol in relation to how and what you receive. If you don't get TLDR, then and you would like to know what it's about, go into Insider and you will find the link there to register, and or you can also receive it in ESG Snapshot, which I will talk about in a moment, which I'll come to. ESG Snapshot is going through a bit of a refresh and review and a revitalisation, and it will actually be ready, one hopes, before the end of Feb. I thought it was going to be ready today, but it's not quite ready. And so it will be coming back, bigger, brighter, more beautiful than ever. And it will have a few more bibs and bobs to it that we think you will find of value. And to those, particularly IKEA and Fujitsu, have given us feedback in relation to its format and content. A big thank you to your info, but also your support about how it is quite valuable. Now, with that, let's jump to today's session. And it poses the simple question: what genuinely happened and what changed in 2025 in our space, in the big space that is the Sustainable Development Agenda, which embraces so much at the moment? And what does it mean for 2026? So I asked our gurus, our talking heads, our people who know these things, our people who are working with members like yourself about these topics, to give their thoughts as to what's going on, not just in their space, but more broadly, and why they think it's important for you to understand what it means for 2026. So theme: what changed in 2025 and what that means for 2026. Our panelists, and I'll just get them to do an actual hand up when I tell them, say their name, is Marian Gruber from Zuid. Put your actual hand up, Marian, thank you. Barbara Nebel from ThinkStep ANZ, thank you. And Ilona Millar from from Gilbert and Tobit. So how are we going to run this? We do have a set of questions that we've been chatting and mulling over. There are 7, but we don't think we'll get through all 7, but we might. We'll do a bit of a round robin for each of them to give their reflections. And then, because we're in meeting mode, there's an opportunity for you, if you wish to open up your microphone and ask a question of the panel just before the quarter hour, when we will finish it. Okay, so for the first question, which is a bit of a tease, and we'll go first to Marianne, is what's the one shift that everybody underestimated in 2025 that you think is going to shape 2026? Marianne, why don't you open first?
Thanks, Andrew. Well, most definitely the AASB 2 regulatory reporting. I think that even before 2025, there was a clear underestimation at the effort that was required, or that would be required for the Group 1 cohort of reporters. And now, of course, there are a lot of organisations who, one, have either got their act together, or two, are a little bit, behind or in the poo, really, as far as getting the right, actually getting things underway. So I am seeing a lot of worry about that in the marketplace at the moment. Yes,
okay.
definitely. So definite underestimation from a wide variety of sectors, sizes, and so on.
Okay. Thank you. Barbara.
I think there was the expectation or the thought that maybe exporters or, importers from overseas and investors are no longer that interested in ESG, and I don't think that has faded at all. It's just might be not quite so obvious, but these tough questions are still being asked, and companies do need to prepare to have proof and information to provide to their export markets and to investors.
That's interesting, because there was an article in Forbes on Friday that said 2025, the year that ESG grew up. And it goes to your very point that to quote Mark Twain, that the death of ESG is greatly exaggerated. And in fact, what's happened is that it's just become operationalized in such a way that it is no longer the kid that's in the back of the room going, pick me, pick me. It's already picked and it's now part of the team and it's got to perform, basically. So thank you for that. Ilona, what do you
Well,
think?
Andrew, I'm sort of going to take a bit of a bigger picture sort of look at sort of the shifts that we saw last year. And I don't think anyone really expected quite the significant departure from multilateralism by the Trump administration that we would, that has happened, and what a significant impact that would have on sort of really geopolitical stability. I mean, one of the things that I picked up in the World Economic Forum's recent global risk report, and I'll just quote this because I think it's really, really sort of telling, is that declining trust, diminishing transparency and respect for the rule of law, along with heightened protectionism, are threatening long-standing international relations, trade and investment, and increasing the propensity for conflict. So I think that basically frames what happened last year and what we're going to see this year, which is more and more disruption and instability. And why is that important? I guess I do a lot of work in the context of the UNFCCC and the sort of, global international treaties, particularly in the environment space. And these are completely under siege, whether it's under siege from a financing perspective, because they no longer have sort of significant budget support that came in from the US, or whether they're under siege from this sort of disruption and fragmentation around being able to move towards consensus on these really significant topics. I think, we're trying to move in, for example, the Paris Agreement from announcements, development of rules, to implementation and operationalization of the Paris Agreement, and to have that filter down into nationally determined contributions and domestic policy. But there isn't that sort of same level of global stability and consensus to push that along. So, the targets that we're sort of looking at in terms of, phasing down in fossil fuels, achieving renewable energy and energy efficiency, all of that is going to be a much heavier lift individually for countries that are still committed to those things. And that's sort of, an area where thankfully Australia is still committed and, taking up the mantle with its co-presidency of COP31. But I think businesses just need to really be prepared for greater disruption, countries going it alone and taking sort of more protectionist views on different topics that relate to sustainability.
And it would have skipped nobody's attention that the UN Secretary General indicated, was it early last week or the week before, that the UN is in its own fiscal crisis. And that if it doesn't receive sufficient funds by, I think it's the end of July, then it will not operate in the way that it currently does. And that has significant impact for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is, and I think I put this out to some of the members, that for the first time in history, the United States is no longer a member of the World Health Organization. And this was an organisation that was established immediately after the Charter on Human Rights was established to help with health and well-being post-World War II. And it is no longer seen as an important multilateral body to support world health. Just quite extraordinary. Ilona, let me come back to you and therefore jump to the third question, which was what did you think mattered in 2025 and what turned out to be largely noise? Because I think your geopolitical point is absolutely right, but what did you see as noise and or was shrill as distinct from profound?
Well, I mean, I think if we bring it into the Australian political context, what was sort of significant was sort of essentially the re-election of the Labor government in circumstances where I think there was some uncertainty of whether that would come to fruition. But that has really provided a level of political stability in Australia which has enabled sort of some of those key reforms in areas that touch on sustainability to move forward and to be sustained. I think if we hadn't seen that re-election, we would be potentially looking at, repeals of climate change acts, repeals of, reporting obligations and reporting standards, or at least sort of, reframing them in quite a different way. And then also in the context of EPBC Act reforms as well, like we have actually now been able to use that platform of, stability to enable the EPBC Act reforms to really sort of be pushed through to set essentially that new framework that will support more sort of and better strategic planning with respect to environmental assessment and approvals, more streamlined decision making, which I know there's sort of views either way about how that works in practice, but ultimately, some of the bottlenecks that we've seen, and I look to the renewable energy sector where it's been years and years and years in the waiting to get approvals for wind farms and solar farms and batteries. Hopefully by having these reforms implemented throughout 2026, the establishment of the new Environment Information Officer, the establishment of the new environmental regulator, that will sort of, be an important sort of driver in terms of how policy develops, at least in the environment sort of space this year. So I think that actually is something that mattered a lot in the Australian context, and we'd be in a very, very different place if we'd had a different outcome in that election.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Jumping to Barbara, you kind of trammel two jurisdictions, Australia and New Zealand. In asking the same question, what do you think mattered in Australia versus New Zealand in 2025 as opposed to what was largely noise?
I think the biggest difference really was that the legislation for the climate risk reporting has now started catching the companies in Australia and New Zealand, whereas in Australia, whereas in New Zealand it was a year ahead, but then in New Zealand it has been scaled back quite significantly now. What is really interesting, there was a lot of noise around it, as in our legislation sort of has really lifted and we don't have to do it anymore. But companies realize we actually do need to do it because the risk has not gone away.
Right.
Compliance has gone away, but climate risk exists no matter what. And so they just want to go now for a more pragmatic approach, which I think is totally fine. So I think the legislation kicked off what it needed to actually wake people up. And now even if it scales back with the requirements, it doesn't matter so much because people realize it is a risk that we do need to actually worry about. And then there are others who find lots of ways of arguing that they don't have any risks related to climate change. Which
I have no risk. Wow.
Yeah, there's some
That's
lucky
amazing.
companies out there.
Yeah, very lucky companies, yes. Marianne, you deal with companies on a very intimate level. What are they sort of saying? Oh, this is the biggest thing since sliced bread. We have to do something about this. Is distinct from what was really important to them, do you think? You're on mute.
Sorry, Andrew. Okay, so look, I would actually say that the companies that I'm working with at the moment have actually, and so they span the mining sector, they span the tech sector, etc. They've actually all been quite proactive, very, very proactive, I should say, in terms of addressing all of their climate reporting, not even climate reporting obligations, but even prior to the regulatory requirements, they were actually onto this. From in a very very focused way. So I'm not sure if I really have anything there, but I can say that what I have seen across the marketplace as well is that there has actually been a lot of a lag on the part of some sectors and some organisations who to Barbara's point, just still do not see that they have any risk, even though they might be in asset management, for example, where they own buildings, So of course there is risk in those particular areas, from climate change and all of the related weather events that happen with all of those. So yeah, I think the larger companies tend to be on the mark. They've realised, but there is still a bit of a lag.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Well, we'll see what the audience thinks. And to the three of you, the one that I thought was noise, but noise of something to come, was AI, and the role that AI played in our space. Anybody got any thoughts on that? I mean,
Yes,
I'm happy to pontificate uphill and down dale about it, but I'm more interested in my panel's views
Oh,
about
right.
this.
Oh, sorry. I have just totally, gone in on this one. I think AI is incredibly interesting from a sustainability reporting perspective. So I focus on Zeward focuses on the impact reporting side of things.
Yeah.
And from what I do see and hear, there is a rise in the use of AI for sustainability reporting. But you have to be so careful in terms of uh, whether or not the information that is being churned back out at you is correct. And also with materiality assessments, this is a really big one. There is a huge number of tech companies that have got we will run your double materiality assessment for free. Just plug in all of your details. There's some bot that searches your AI, and hey presto, you have your double materiality results. I actually inputted in my business name into one of these double materiality assessments. I thought, oh God, this will be really interesting. Am I being, will I no longer have that as an offering? And I thought, I will so have this as an offering, because what came back to me was some very, very, very strange perspectives on what is material for Zeward. Things such as alien. Yes, it was hilarious. One of my medium priorities that I will need to budget for is invasive alien species. And
Sorry, are we talking biodiversity or are we talking outer space?
I have no idea, Andrew. I have no idea. So
Okay.
this is literally, you plug in your company name, the AI world does its search, and it spits out some very interesting information.
Right.
So the rise of AI as far as sustainability reporting and materiality, it's not there yet.
Unless
Just
it's making an oblique reference to Elon Musk and SpaceX, who knows?
yes, it was very yes, and I had to laugh. I had to laugh. I thought, oh, surely there'll be something good that comes out of this, and it was not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either Ilona or Barbara, was there anything you wanted to
Look,
add
I
to
mean,
that?
I would say I do think AI is more than noise, and we're sort of seeing a real uptake of implementation, but within the parameters that work as they need to do in a law firm. We're very conscious that there are tools and uses for AI that will significantly improve the efficiency of the provision of legal services, but they still need very close sort of review and oversight to ensure that they're getting things right, they're not hallucinating, and all of that comes down to how well you input data and prompts and train the system. So I think we're definitely using and testing and trialing all sorts of different tools to see what works best in different scenarios. But there are certainly some very good use cases and some that are not so good. We've tested it with looking at how it can support sustainability assessment, looking at sort of reports and pulling out compliance with standards, and it's terrible. So on some of those things, I mean, trying to you can't you definitely can't rely on a tool at the moment, or at least one that we've sort of worked with to give you the level of analysis and understanding and detail to do a legal sort of review of that type of document at this stage.
Okay. And Barbara, a thick step using it?
So we're looking at it and we are observing, similar to Marian, how are others using it.
Mm-hmm.
We do know we observe it in tools who try to do Scope 3 emissions mapping against emission factors. We have seen some good progress there. I think for materiality assessment, doing it totally letting the tool do it, very similar to Marianne's experience. There will be efficiencies.
Yeah.
Definitely. But it always will need, and certainly right now, it needs the expert interpretation and the so what.
Yeah.
I think that is where it will shift. I don't think we're there yet at all, but it will move to having more of the, okay, so what, help with the interpretation, those sorts of things. So there will be those efficiencies and the shift towards that.
Okay. That's very interesting. And I don't know if anybody caught up with the ads that were being shown through the NFL game in the US this week or over the weekend. But there was a series run by, is it the one who owns Claude, the LLM that's Claude. And what jumped out at me was this notion that AI will soon be underpinned by advertisements, that there will actually be ads included in the exercise of the use of AI. And so it will just move straight to, and you should go and use X company to do the thing that you're worried about. And I'm just worried about using that as a result. They're really good ads, by the way. So if you have a moment, go and look up on YouTube, Claude AI NFL ads 2026. They're really, really funny, but they send a very, very important message. Okay, thanks for that. And that goes to the next question about the gap that you're seeing between executive intent and organizational capability. One of the really interesting exercises that think tanks and groups like GreenBiz and GlobeScan and even the OECD have done in the last few weeks is ask questions around organisational capability into 2026 of CSOs. And as some of the members know, I actually answer a lot of these surveys as if I am speaking on your behalf, which is incredibly arrogant of me. But I'm there to try and send a message, an Australian message back to these international or certainly Northern Hemisphere surveys, that what they may hear is not necessarily what goes on everywhere in the world. And one of the interesting questions that was asked in all three of them was, is your executive still all in on sustainability? Or have you seen over the last 2 years a fall off in executive intent in relation to ESG? And between you and me, I think that question is largely framed around an American business audience rather than necessarily any other. But it's interesting, and it raises this question about, are you seeing, and it almost goes to Marianne's point a moment ago around companies still doing quite a lot of work in relation to preparation on reporting, but also now implementation as a result of the data that they start to get into their organisation. And the question then is, well, is the C-suite still, do they still have your back in doing this, or are you starting to see a drop off? We might start with Barbara on that question. What's your thoughts, if not your observations, about companies or clients that you deal with?
So we actually deal directly with lots of CEOs, but also a level higher with the boards.
Yeah.
And we do deal a lot with the Chief Sustainability Officer, who still get a lot of questions from their CEOs, who get questions from the board. So
yeah.
I have not seen a drop off at that level. What I have observed, though, is that boards are often sort of split in half. One half really gets it, and the other one needs serious upskilling about understanding even just the risks around not doing enough and the importance of having a really solid ESG strategy, how it can add business value. And I think that translation bit is what is still missing.
Okay, interesting. Ilona, you have a very different and unique take on this because you deal primarily with legal counsel, who would no doubt also deal with boards. What observations would you have on that?
I think sort of similar where we're seeing boards are still very conscious of the importance of understanding this, and they're starting to better understand that sustainability is a matter of risk and business strategy and not sort of part of the nice to announce initiatives that they might want to sort of put in a report. But I think where things have really been changing is, where we have we're seeing the executive and the teams that sit below the board be really interrogated about how you're actually going to meet these targets. What are we doing? Because I think before there'd been this rush to announce things, and now we're seeing, the step back and going, wait a second, what's our reasonable basis? Can we do this? What's our transition plan? So we're seeing that maturity in terms of the risk assessment and the planning, which is sort of resulting in some companies walking back from some of their targets, or changing them, or looking at different expressions around what they're able to achieve, because they've now done that work and they've been using that information to revise things. I think the other area that we've been working with a lot of companies on is sort of the need to basically upskill everyone in the organisation. It's not just about the board being trained and the C-suite, the CFO and the CSO and the CEO being across sustainability obligations. It's sort of embedding that across the organisation. So we're working with companies now looking at sort of clearer training modules, looking at more distinct policies and processes and plans around how do you do things. This is particularly in the context of sort of greenwashing and sustainability statements, because sort of the risk of that, given the regulator action that we've seen from the ACCC and ASIC, is very real. It's not going to go away. And so I think we're starting to see companies really focus on how do we make sure we get that right, and we have that as a sustainable process within our organisation and uplift everyone on that particular topic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Marianne, do you have any reflections on this as well?
Yeah, well, I think it just depends. So I guess so reframing. Am I reframing the question? It depends upon what aspect of sustainability reporting. So I'm coming at this from a sustainability reporting perspective. So from what I've seen, there has just been with many organisations, there has been such a focus on the regulatory requirements of reporting and that very, very narrow climate view. And in many organisations, that has taken the priority. It's the front. It's everything that we should be doing because it is compliance driven. And unfortunately, what has happened with some companies, and I think this is a big mistake, is that with some companies, the impact reporting is falling by the wayside. So that is your your GRI reporting, SDG reporting has gone right down, I think. But the focus on impact reporting has lessened in the face of compliance reporting, I think, which is a really big mistake. So impact reporting, of course, provides you with the foundational requirements for how to actually report on the regulatory climate reporting and whatever's coming next, nature, so any other social reporting, etc.
Okay. Well, that leads to the question that the four of us were talking about just before we started, about stop start. And the question is, what should companies stop doing in 2026 because it doesn't add any decision useful value? Who wants to take a stab at that?
Well, I would say that companies should stop using compliance as their baseline. then yep, we tick all the boxes, we're good. It's just not enough to really extract the real business value of having a properly integrated ESG strategy.
Wow. Okay. I'll be devil's advocate to that. You would say that, Barbara, because you work for a consultancy. So, and I'm not, and I'm only doing it to be provocative, but the challenge is, and it goes back to the earlier question about organizational capability, that most CSO teams are just absolutely flat strat doing what they have to do to make sure that their board / company are not in trouble. And so how do they do, and I just saw Claire nodding her head furiously. How do you take that and turn it into something valuable? Well, maybe that we should park that actually, Andrew. Don't give away everything. I'm sure all three of you would have something to talk about how you do that rather than necessarily how to stop it.
I'll share one observation that we had. I think there is actually, well, from my observation, when the economy gets tough, some companies just go, well, we're not doing it anymore if it's voluntary. And companies who've been doing it for a long time really embedded it as a strategy. They realize the value. So if I look at our business, we've never lost a client, an ongoing year-on-year client, when economy turns down. We might not have gained as many new ones, and we might have lost ones that were a one-off because they wanted to tick a box. But those have properly integrated it. They see the real value and keep doing it. So to me, that is proof. It actually makes sense for them, even if their economic situation might be tough. They just won't throw it out the window.
Okay. Marianne, start.
Yeah, well, stop dilly-dallying, everyone. Okay. So, well, in terms of what should you stop doing? Yeah, look, just stop navel gazing and actually, really think about not just the compliance. If you haven't started on that, then you're going to be in a bit of trouble. But also, and again, you might say, Andrew, that I'm saying this because I'm a consultant. But you really, really do need to start having a look at, if you haven't already, really strengthening your environmental, social, and governance, all of your ESG reporting, so that you can do everything else really, really well. And that's about, going back to Barbara's point, really having a good, solid ESG strategy. So unless you do that piece of work, and impact reporting will actually help you to define a lot of those baselines. That will then help you out. So get on with it.
Okay, Ilona.
Yeah.
Look, I think the same message. It's time to sort of move to implementation and really, actually, not just to have, all of the work to write the plan. It's to actually do the plan. It's about making those investment decisions and not walking away from investment decisions that are good decisions for both, the long-term sustainability of the business, but also the long-term sustainability of the planet.
Yeah. For my part, I would say stop thinking that you're the only one that can do everything. And I say that in love with the membership in mind, which is use us as a tool. A number of you have reached out asking for briefings about what's going on. We're going to be I can't say the word, bringing into being a quarterly update for those members that want to have an outsider come and tell them what's going on, so they don't have to do it. And you can do it. You can use this in front of the board. You can use this in front of your teams. ARTC's recently done this for us, with us. And it's designed to help you start those conversations that you're finding very hard to get going because you're just doing everything else. So that if you've got on your checklist, I'd love to talk about the S, but I haven't got time, then use this as a tool by which to do that. So it's more about stop panicking that you have to do everything. Please start thinking about how you can extract the value of your membership in broader ways. Okay, last question, and it's obviously for the benefit of the BCSD members. Where do you see the biggest opportunity in 2026 to lead rather than react? It's a very broad question, Andrew. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I might.
will.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Marian.
Oh, no, you go.
Marian, Ilona, and then Barbara.
Okay. Well, I think that what would be really great for many organizations to start thinking about is to really work out, going beyond what am I trying to say here? Oh, you should have gone first, Ilona. Just kidding. Okay, so really going beyond the really getting into the materiality assessment and working out what creating value really means for that organisation and for their stakeholders, and that can actually be achieved through actually running through a double materiality perspective, just to see, okay, so this is what we've got right now. This is what we've implemented as far as our ESG strategy goes underneath each of those pillars. What is it going to cost us? Yep. So what will it financially cost us? And that will then, be a really fantastic cyclical way of being able to implement your ESG strategy across the board and really be able to communicate value, make that meaningful. Don't just use the words. I see the words used a lot, but with very little evidence behind it.
Okay, thank you. Ilona.
Look, I'm going to pivot to nature, and I think we have a real opportunity to, build on the work that was being done at the end of last year on nature-related risks and opportunities, and where that's sort of looking at going sort of both in the terms of, the forward outlook to potential mandatory disclosure around nature-related risks and opportunities, but also I think more importantly for the members, actually starting to trial and work through LEAP assessments and looking at impacts and dependencies and actually understanding how you can integrate sort of nature into business strategy and better sort of manage those key risks that arise from nature. I mean, in Australia, I would say, almost every business is going to be, materially impacted by nature-related risks that, really should be, moving on the same trajectory that we've seen with climate. And we've seen the benefit of doing the risk assessments, the scenario analysis, the work around climate and what that means to sort of add long-term value to businesses in the climate sense. I think we need to be moving into that for nature.
That's a beautiful Dorothy Dixer for me to then say. But for the lead and learn members that have already undertaken the BCSD nature maturity assessment, one of the key insights was exactly that it starts you on a path, and it can be mirrored very neatly into the apparatus that you already have for climate. So it's not as if you're starting from ground zero. Barbara.
Well, I was going to say pretty much what Marian already said. So I was going to say talk to your stakeholders and identify meaningful metrics. Don't just try and think you have to measure everything. But since Marian already covered that, I'll go over to circular economy because I think circular economy is still very much we have a waste strategy, we do circular economy. We recycle, we do circular economy. Circular economy is not a waste strategy. It really can be a business strategy, and it covers so many other points. It's so strongly related to carbon. It can be very closely related to nature. And I think it just deserves the same rigor as carbon does to really get your head around it. And then don't use it in sort of the greenwashing term. So I think there is a lot of potential to really get serious about it, measure it, use it to achieve those other goals as well. So
Okay.
I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Very helpful. And for my 2 cents worth, I'm going to draw Ilona into one of them. Two things. Very much pay attention to trade implications this year, because whether it's critical minerals, whether it is CBAM, whether it is an EU-AU free trade agreement, whether it's the exposition of the Australian-Indian Free Trade Agreement, there are enormous opportunities that are coming down the line if you understand that those particular indicators within some of those agreements are all about environmental and social dividend, and they create real opportunities. My second idea is Australia with Turkey, and we'll have more to talk about that because we've been talking with WBCSD, BCSD Turkey, and BCSD Brazil about what to do in relation to COP31. The enormous appetite, I think, that the government will have, particularly through Minister Bowen's office, for business to play an incredibly important strategic role in getting the world to focus on the need for investment in Australia. And with that, how business plays that role over the next 2 years. Because remember, we technically don't take over the presidency because that's Turkey's, but the understanding that we have is that Minister Bowen does play a critical role in relation to the negotiations and therefore what's on the table. And with that, they will also have a role in relation to what the president of the COP does, which is obviously Turkey. And we're waiting, I think it's this week, to understand what the thematic topics are going to be for COP31. And they have a very serious impact upon business because they then translate to the action agenda. And in talking to our friends in Brazil, in Sabetes, they already have a tool, a whole tool, a suite of tools in relation to the action agenda that they ran, and they're handing that over to Turkey and Australia through the BCSD with the support of the WBCSD as well. So that was a bit of an advertorial. So conscious that we are now over time by 2 minutes, but is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question? And I should open it up so I can see if there's any hands up.
I did have questions, Andrew, but they were answered through your questions by the panel, and thank you very, very much. It was such a good conversation. Just wanted to add a comment.
Yes, please.
As Barbara said, the companies who have embedded sustainability at the get-go, they don't have a problem with any regulatory things that are coming in, but it's for the other companies who haven't embedded. There is a risk. On the positive side, they're talking about sustainability because of the mandatory requirements, but it has become a reactive tick box exercise. Give you a good example. If you're engaging a consultant to do your scenario analysis, the finance team would say, oh, we'll just give you the information, you go and do the scenario analysis for us. And they're not making the effort to learn and embed that process. So there is a risk in this compliance space.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm happy for the other three to make some comment, but I want to just conscious of time and round it out. Two things I would say to that, and one goes to a point Ilona made a minute ago, but the first is the transition planning guidance consultation came out from Treasury last Thursday, and stay tuned because every element of the finance department of your company is going to be very interested in what it says and what it expects companies to do. And it won't be on your shoulders as the CSOs to be doing it. It'll be on the finance sector or the tax and finance sector of your organisation. The second is, and I want to round this out, taking Ilona's point earlier around the geopolitical context, it is important to note that Australia does not have an election until 2028, and that at the moment, this government looks like being returned. So there is at least 9 years of consistent application in relation to legislation on environmental and social issues that is not going to go away anytime soon. So the expectation is, I think Ilona alluded to, which was it could have changed quite dramatically if there'd been a change of politics, is that this government is unlikely to change it. In fact, it will go and dive in deeper into some of these aspects going forward. And so with that, not only is your role as the CSO assured, but it is actually really hardwired now into an organisation's dividend going forward. And anybody who thinks that this is all about to fall apart or be dismantled, I think is quite, I will say it, I think they're going to be quite delusional. And with that party political piece, I will finish up and thank so much our panelists. Thank you to Ilona, thank you to Marianne, and thank you to Barbara. As I indicated before, the recording of this will be available via Insider on Monday, and it will also be then put up onto the YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel immediately following. Don't forget to, if you haven't already registered for the next, no, if you've registered for Exchange, you will already have it in your diary, but we also have a new series called Education, which I know there's one scheduled for Thursday. That's going to have to be postponed until March because the person can't now do the event, so we have to do it. We have to wait until March. But the network one is going to be very interesting because that's going to be a discussion about some of the trade issues that we've just been talking about. And I'm very much looking forward to the landscape conversation on the 25th of February, because we have the CEO of the Superpower Institute going to be talking to us about the piece of work that they've recently released in relation to why Australia should return to a carbon price. And then in the second half hour, Brendan Wintle from the Biodiversity Council is going to be giving us their appraisal of the significance of the portfolio of nature legislation that's coming down the line from the federal government. So if you haven't registered for landscape in particular, I would strongly encourage you to do so. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. See you at the next exchange, and see you hopefully reading with ferocious interest Insider. And for now, look forward to seeing you somewhere in the future. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.